Matter of fact, specifically, Luke personally addressed his two books to the same person. Notice here with me in Luke chapter 1 and verse 3, he names the person. He says, I'm writing to you, most excellent Theophilus. Now, if you'll flip over to Acts chapter 1 and verse number 1, you'll see that name mentioned again. Luke, notice there real quickly. In Acts 1 and verse 1, Luke writes the following. He says, in the first book, O Theophilus, I dealt with all that Jesus began to do and teach. So notice he references there's a volume 1, the first book. That would be the Gospel of Luke. He's addressing it to the same man, Theophilus, and he's saying, in the first book, I began telling the story of all that Jesus did and taught. So Acts is the continuation of that story, of all that Jesus continued to teach and do after he ascended into heaven, and he did it through his church. And so what I'm wanting you to notice, though, is that Luke specifically addressed his two books to the same person, Theophilus. Who is this guy? We don't know. We don't really know. We've got some theories. But of course, if you'll notice back in Luke chapter 1, verse 3, he calls him the most excellent Theophilus. Well, with that title, most excellent, it suggests that he was some type of official or at least held some place of prominence in society. So again, this man was probably a thinker. He was an educated man. He was at the least a professional person. Was he a Christian? We don't really know. Was he someone that Luke was writing to, hoping to convince him? He says, I'm writing that you may have confidence. So is he starting to believe, or has he been a believer for a while? We're not quite sure. Was he simply a friend of Luke? Maybe he was a fellow doctor or a colleague. Maybe he was somebody that he had met in school. Maybe he was a patient of Luke. Somebody that he had helped at some point in his practice, and now they were simply good friends. In fact, I read that some historians believe, now this is very cool, some historians believe that Theophilus was the Apostle Paul's lawyer, because Paul had to have a lawyer when he went before the emperor during his trial. And as you know, Luke traveled with Paul and was there with him during all of these trials and imprisonments and so forth. And maybe some believe that the lawyer's name was Theophilus, and so maybe this is the same Theophilus, that maybe Luke is good friends with the lawyer, again a professional, a man of education, and so he's writing Theophilus these books. But whomever he may be, one thing's for sure, Dr. Luke gave him a precise, reliable, accurate, and complete understanding of the most amazing story that the human race has ever had. The story of Jesus Christ. Luke gives it in clear, complete, persuasive language. It's written for the thinker. Luke wanted this man to think clearly about Jesus and to know the truth. That's the end. To know the truth. Think about it. Luke basically gave up a lucrative career as a doctor to become a person who committed his life to researching the truth about the most amazing story in human history. He left his practice as a doctor to go for years and years and put in the work and the time to make sure that Theophilus and everybody else that read these two books would have all of the truth. What an amazing sacrifice this man made. This is the kind of sacrifice that inspires pastors to go out and to say, I'm going to dedicate my life to study the Word of God and to be a student of the Bible and to research and do the homework so that when I stand before God's people or stand before an audience like in a school or a university, I want them to be able to know the truth. I want to have researched it diligently so I can answer their questions about the most important story in all of the world. So let me ask you, are you the type of person that likes to have the facts? I mean, you like to have the facts. I know Christianity is about faith. I know ultimately it's about trusting in Jesus. But I want you to know, Christianity is not a leap into the dark. Faith, real faith, is not some blind leap into the dark. Real faith is when you step into the light. When you hear the truth about God, about Jesus, the facts about salvation and eternity, and you believe it and you trust it so much to respond to it. That's real faith. Faith, true Christianity is not some people that are brainwashed and turned off their minds and have just stepped out into darkness blindly by faith. No, not at all. It's people who have gotten the facts. They've thought through it. And they've been convinced that the gospel is true.